gold has and silver had just been so resilient. On the back of interest rate hikes, the price has held.
Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics, and we are digging back into the silver, gold, and inflation world on today's show. Obviously, a lot happening out there, and fortunate to be joined by some silver mining experts today. A longtime regular guest on the show, Jorge Ramiro Monroy of Reyna Silver, and also joining us from Reyna Silver as well as Lauren Megaw, who we've had visit us a few times. Lauren, was great to catch up with you in person at last year's Silver Symposium, and quite a lot has happened since then, because as you probably remember well, it was not the rosiest of times in the silver world. Silver price was dropping just about every day we were there, went below $18, and fortunately a little bit of a significant rally since then. So Lauren, great to have you on here, and Jorge, great to have you on here as well. And how are you guys doing today?
We're doing great. Thank you for having us. It's been a minute since we were here, and very happy to see you and happy to talk about silver.
Well, it's great to have you here. I like that native silver you have hanging out behind you, and certainly, as we'll touch on a little bit later, you guys have been doing quite well with your projects and moving things forward. Although, Jorge, perhaps a good place to start is that in the midst of, we've seen how the metals prices, depending on what the Fed does, seems to impact that more than the supply and demand at times. Yet, even despite that, here we have the Fed still hiking away, raising rates, not giving a finite answer of when they're stopping just yet. And I find it pretty interesting that we're recording Wednesday morning here, 1926 gold, really at the higher end of the range. We're not at the all-time highs yet, but
yeah, that's a beautiful price, Chris.
I mean, this is even before a Fed pivot or more quantitative easing or anything like that. Are you surprised with this rally that we've seen here, and that it's gotten as high as it has, even with the current hiking cycle?
No, I am very surprised, to be honest, because just before Christmas, I was sort of bracing. In that last announcement from the Fed, sort of being very consistent on increasing rates, et cetera, I was thinking, this doesn't sound good for the short-term movement of the prices. But listen, it's just now. How many years has it been, Chris? Basically since the beginning of COVID, so almost 3 years, where it's. If you think about it from one perspective, I spoke this morning to an investor, and she said something to me that I thought was quite interesting. She told me, look, I started investing in silver in early 2022 when they were talking about, transitory inflation. And I was thinking, this is not going to be transitory, this is going to go up. So she got in kind of to start buying gold and silver at kind of even higher prices than we have now.
Right.
And she was telling me, if somebody had told me we're going to go through, historic highs of inflation and gold and silver are going to go down, I just couldn't believe it. So from that perspective, it's that is one perspective if you've been if you sort of joined the market recently. But if you think about it on a longer term, for people like us who've been in silver and gold, gold and silver had just been so resilient. On the back of interest rate hikes, the price has held. If you also look at the I think gold and silver have been very good at doing what they're supposed to do, which is preserve value. So I think from that perspective, it's been great, and I think that resilience of gold and silver in the face of this rate increase is actually very encouraging. So I'm certainly really encouraged by that resilience, and I think the other thing, maybe since we've spoken and also speaking to investors over the last year, specifically in a sort of more retail, but even for some institutions, there was starting to be a big sense that Bitcoin and crypto was the new gold and silver. And I think that has been disproven quite convincingly in the last in the last few months. So I think a lot of positives continue to pile in for gold and silver, and I'm personally, especially for silver, God, I'm sure you and many of your listeners read the last Silver Institute report. It's just so many things in favor of the metal, and as we're in the exploration business, so we on the supply side, we're deeply aware of how rare silver deposits are and how much more difficult they're to find these days. And so it's it's an interesting time for silver. And as we start 2023, I think it's a year that's I'm personally very excited about.
Yeah, and in terms of the silver side, I suppose there's a couple ways one could look at this, as I'll pull the silver chart back up. Obviously, as gold is closer to its all-time highs than silver, you could say on one hand, silver might have some catching up to do, which certainly I would subscribe to. And again, you pointed out how last year we did get those reports, record deficit, record demand, and with, again, so much of the silver being consumed as opposed to on the gold side. So certainly a good case to be made that there's some catching up to do. Yet at the same time, it's interesting when you think about silver at 24 and change, that's actually higher than silver has been for the majority of its history.
Yeah.
We had the brief spike in 1980, which did not last too long. Again, some unusual factors with the exchanges and margins and making it sell only. Yet, we had about a year back in 2011, goes up to $49, stays in the 40s. Yet after it came back down, we really haven't seen, outside of these last couple of years, silver in the $24 range. So still quite an elevated level. Although again, you have on the other side, the cost for mining silver are going up, which we'll dig into as well. But interesting, this is a higher silver price than we've seen for the majority of silver's history.
No, absolutely, and keep in mind that still, if you look at the silver to gold ratio, it's still quite high, right? But look, from a perspective, maybe from an industry perspective, this is a very positive price for silver, because one thing that on the mining side of silver has been challenging is just a consistently low prices for a very long period of time, between 2013 and let's say 2020, pretty much, with some exceptions. But since 2020, the prices has basically given a lot of breathing room to the producers, where they've actually been able to replenish their cash position. The reason why this price is very positive for the mining industry, when you talk about mining silver, is it allows you to make decisions of starting a new mine, to make decisions of allocating more capital towards exploration, and then in terms of I think in terms of the asset class, I think you can make a case that it's still quite undervalued, right, on almost every metric. And if you look at almost every other commodity, like literally almost every other commodity, whether it's gold, nickel, cobalt, copper, they've all touched all-time highs in the last couple of years. So I think silver is the one commodity that still hasn't being let loose, so to speak. So you have I think just again, from my perspective as the CEO of a silver exploration company, I get to speak to a variety of investors every day, some retail investors, some institutional investors, obviously some analysts as well. And the sense that everybody has had over the last 2 years is that silver is still undervalued, and that there is undoubtedly a lot of upside for the metal. So I think those are interesting things to look at. And the other thing, over the past let's say 12, let's say over the past 10 years, of watching silver prices, one thing that I've noticed is that silver, while it has been sort of trending low, it very rarely stays much below production costs.
Right.
It just very rarely happens. So there seems to be some sort of resistance, and as you said, silver mining costs have gone up, but at $24, most everybody's making good margins.
Yeah, a
But
lot of
when you were talking about when you met Lauren in I guess that was September, and that time where it dipped below 18, that's not great. But it didn't stay very long, and it seems to historically, every time it hits below production costs, very quickly it seems to be some sort of resistance level as well.
which naturally makes a lot of sense. Sometimes we wonder if in the derivative world these rules hold, although a great chart by Steve St. Angelo we had recently that showed exactly what you were saying has served as a bit of a floor. And Lauren, obviously, you're in the investor relations side of this, so you're talking to the investors all day. And Jorge pointed out that we have the retail and the institutional, and certainly it seems like the retail market has generally been pretty strong, especially on the lines of this recent rally. I'm curious, what are you hearing on the institutional side?
I think that from what I'm hearing, the retail side, people are seeing things as being on sale. If you're bullish about where you think silver's going, when silver drops, it's a good time to get into companies, and especially companies that you see as having higher upside, companies that did well. With Reyna, I mean, one of the other big aspects and the institutions picked up on is we didn't budge in terms of share price from when we did our financing in June all the way through silver really taking a header. We didn't go much below. I think our low was 26 cents, right? So in a lot of ways, when silver really takes a dive like that and you're a company that stays stable, that's like having a win, right? And so I think that's one of the reasons, another reason why we get the traction that we do, because we have the thesis of we're looking for the style of deposits that are buffered from the volatility in the precious metals space, right? There's a cyclic aspect to it. So that's why we go after the type of deposits we go for. And it means that when things are down and people are looking at, okay, who's on sale? Who's a good company to get involved with now? Reyna is something that seems to be showing up on the top of people's lists, and that's a pretty fun. It's a pretty good spot to be in when you're in IR.
Yeah, and I wonder sometimes if the fact that the silver price has risen as quickly as it has, that it's still sinking in. Obviously, we've seen a lot of volatility, and 2022 was a hard year for a lot of the silver stocks. Are in a general sense, are institutional funds still a little cautious on the silver space in general? Are they the tone you get from them, are they starting to think, okay, maybe this does stick here and it could be time to go back in? Because again, a lot of the general silver market, especially the juniors, is still on the lower side.
Yeah, so you so yeah, on the junior side, I think people are certainly being cautious, no question about it. But I think there's a marked change in mood in the last couple of weeks with the new year, and I think a lot of people sort of seeing a bottoming and also a turning point. I think there's been a few announcements of some in the silver space, some not so much in the junior space, but on some of the more mid-tier producers, a few big financing announcements. So that indicates that there is the appetite is back, and that eventually trickles down to the juniors. And so I think there's certainly been a marked improvement in the sentiment.
Okay. And Lauren?
I'm going to agree with Jorge on that. I mean, we're in a lot of the same conversations, and I think there's also an aspect of there's some funds that got pretty burned in crypto.
Yeah.
And they're now looking at, okay, whoa, I need to reallocate, I need to rebalance, and it seems like that's where we're getting some interesting conversations with people as well. And so, you know, I went to school in Silicon Valley. I've seen crypto from sort of its infancy when it was really first taking off, and I've always been skeptical because I like the idea of having something physical, having something that it's tied to. And I think a lot of people who are in this space and listening to this podcast and your channels, they're a big fan of that as well. And I think people are coming back around to that. There was a bit of a fad there, and people got burnt, and the question is now coming back to, I don't want to say the tried and true, but yeah, in a lot of ways coming back to something that you can hold, something that is physical.
Yeah, and maybe a piggyback to Lauren's point. I was with her in Silicon Valley, meeting a couple of precious metals funds that are based in Silicon Valley, and we were talking to the fund manager, and he was explaining to us, he's raised his it's a physical and physical and gold and silver stocks is the basis of the fund, and he's raised this fund from family offices in Silicon Valley, which is sort of the family offices of the tech entrepreneurs. And one of the things because I said to him, it must be quite a surreal experience for you to be raising money for a silver and gold fund from Silicon Valley. And he was sharing with me some of the anecdotes of going to to family offices and saying, look, in my opinion, it would be prudent to put 5 to 10% of the portfolio and the net worth into gold and silver, physical with some stocks. And they were saying that he get a lot of pushback, and they were saying so and so the head of the family office has asked us to allocate 30% to crypto, and maybe we'll consider putting 0.5% of the portfolio in gold and silver, but we don't really believe in it. This was about a year ago, a little less than a year, but certainly before the crypto started to slide. But I think just the story to illustrate a little bit of what the sentiment has been from family offices and retail investors towards gold and silver. And I think for those who held those beliefs that crypto was a better store of value than gold and silver, I think that has been discredited and disproven over the last year or so. So certainly seeing a beneficial effect towards our sector from that happening.
Yeah, obviously been a tough time in the crypto world, and I guess we'll see what the future of that is. Yet certainly some significant volatility there. And then in terms of the metals, it's interesting. Obviously, you have a lot of volatility over the last year or two, yet if you take a step back or had been able to hibernate through that and not worry about it as much, a lot of the factors that brought so many people into the metals and that provide the merits, I mean, they haven't gone away. Here's Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen urging swift action to increase the spending limit to avoid defaulting on the debt ceiling. We've seen this pop through time and time again over the years. Here we see the debt. It's not as if that's changing. And this is a clip. I'm going to play about 20 seconds of this. I thought this was interesting because it will speak to, I think, one of the key reasons why people have turned to gold and silver, and then we can get your comment on it. But this was from a meeting at the FDIC, and let me play a couple seconds of that here.
Institutions, and it's really important. I mean, it's a little bit conflicted, right? I mean, it's important that people understand they can be bailed in, but you don't want a huge run on the institution. But they have, I mean, they're going to be. And it could be an early warning signal to the FDIC and the primary regulators when these things happen. And there may be some other prices. This is similar to what Jay was saying in the market that you can tell whether people understand who's going to be protected, who isn't going to be protected.
So this is the FDIC talking about bail-ins, crises, who's going to be protected, and I think that's at the heart of what people got a taste of in 2008, have been concerned about since then. And any thoughts on, is that why people are still turning to gold and silver, and if that's a rightful way to respond?
Yeah, look, I think it's yes, of course, but I think the kind of group of people who are aware of this, still very small, right? At the end of the day, it's not. I think by and large, I think you start to now, get. I think there was a couple of reports from Goldman on gold this year. Yes, over the last year, you see more speaking about gold and silver in the mainstream media, but I think at the end of the day, people are still incredibly bullish on the U.S. economy, and I think we haven't seen that, like, the real money flowing into our sector yet. I think that's something very important to keep in mind. That if things are recovering and we're seeing better sort of sentiment, but when we're talking about better sentiment, we're mostly speaking about better sentiment from the investors who are typically investing in the sector. You know what I mean? It's not. I think you are seeing some new investors in the sector, yes, but by and large, precious metals, especially physical, but also the equities, it still hasn't attracted that attention from the big capital pools. And which is of course what we're all sort of waiting for, because that's going to be the catalyst for a more significant bull market. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting video for sure, Chris. But I think we will all agree that the majority of people are still quite confident. We were talking to another investor a couple of days ago who's just very bullish on the U.S. economy. They think they'll be able to deal with inflation. They think they'll be able to eventually sort out the debt. That I think that's a more mainstream view of what people believe in, and that's I think most people are still not realizing the importance of having precious metals in their portfolio, let alone mining stocks.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I know there's a lot of people who are confident. I keep seeing stories like this. Investors seek to pull 20 billion from core real estate funds as property values decline, and I guess quite a divergence, as often is the case, in terms of the opinions of how things go. But I think it'll be an interesting year, 2023. Things seem to be slowing down a bit. We'll see how the Fed responds, and but I think there's a lot of interest growing in gold and silver. And
yeah, I think that the biggest obstacle that gold and silver have to overcome is the U.S. dollar, because I think by and large that's what's people are saying, okay, yes, stocks are looking sketchy, real estate is looking sketchy, but converting to cash, the U.S. dollar is still quite strong, even with all the debt. People don't care because they see it as the most stable asset. So I think that's a change in sentiment towards U.S. dollar. That could be a big detriment for our sector.
Well, I hear you, and we are getting some change in sentiment, maybe not as much within the U.S., but obviously we've seen stories for the last couple of years. Here's Saudi Arabia recently open to settling trade in other currencies, and we won't perhaps go into everything that's happening with China and Russia today, but certainly interesting time where it's almost like people are picking sides of what they believe and how they're responding. So either case, appreciate everything that you guys shared there. And perhaps before we wrap this one up, you could touch on some of the progress that you guys have made with Reyna. Obviously, you had some drill results out yesterday at Medicine Springs, your third project, and perhaps you could give us an update on how things are looking there.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I'll let Lauren, who's the geologist, in the group, give you guys an update. But definitely very excited about releasing for the first time results at Medicine Springs.
Chris, Medicine Springs has been such a amazing experience, I think, for a lot of people at Reyna. It's how I got involved. And to take it from a project where you're out there and you see feature out of feature that says there's something big here, and then you test it, and we did that Jasperoid selective sampling survey, and the geochemistry was telling us, okay, there's something big at depth, and then to go into our reconnaissance phase 1 drilling, testing to see whether or not we have the magic host rock that's needed for a carbonate replacement deposit. If you don't have the carbonate, you can't really have a carbonate replacement deposit. And, we were just excited when we got the majority of a nearly 800-meter hole was carbonate. We're going, this is fantastic. And then we got the drill result back. And when you get 2.4 meters of over a kilo silver, that gets really exciting. That's in the historic part of the Medicine Springs project. And then we took a step out, and not a little one. Like I said, this is recon. We were trying to figure out how big this system is and get some very brief sketch out. So we went 1.7 kilometers to the southwest, and there we intersected even more silver mineralization, right? And that was 7.4 meters running 186 grams per ton silver. And included in that is 4.6 meters running 270 plus grams per ton silver. And, those are with the lead and zinc that tells us, okay, this is the type of chemistry, this is the kind of mineralogy in the kind of structures. I mean, that's a pretty thick sequence right there. And so we look at that from the team's experience in looking at CRDs and exploring CRDs. And the question now becomes, where did it come from? Because those kind of numbers don't come out of thin air. They're attached to some other part of the system. And that's one of the beautiful things about carbonate replacement deposits, is that they're these continuous zone systems. We don't know which direction yet because we've got 4 holes in the ground and they're widely spaced. But this is, for a first 4 holes out of a project, it's hard to ask for more. So we're really excited with the results, and really looking forward to going back out there and drilling in 2023.
Yeah, and it seems like you looked for a lot of the clues. Obviously, Dr. Peter Megaw was talking about the signs of the carbonate replacement deposit, and now it's nice to see that you have some verification as you get the first set of drill results back in. So it seems like you had an idea what was out there, and now you're finding it, and you're also going to be continuing drilling this year.
Yeah, and the aspect was the surface exposure. There's backup. There's 13 key features for early stage CRD exploration that we look for. Indicators of large, high grade carbonate replacement deposits. And before our first drill hole, we saw 10 out of the 13. The question was whether or not the mineralization event interacted with the right type of rock. And that's why we're excited that not only do we have this great surface expression of something at depth, but now we also know that we have the potential for the high potential host rock. And we're seeing evidence of this absolutely gorgeous what's called fugitive calcite. It's an indicator of replacement, and it's really cool because it glows bright pink, and we're seeing it all over the core. And the cool thing about fugitive calcite is that it's representative of that replacement reaction. So in the acidic mineralizing fluid, interacts with the limestone. It deposits out the goodies that you care about, but the calcite in solution, so the chemical components that make up the carbonate, that keeps going. And it takes a couple of hitchhikers with it. It takes some trace metals, in particular manganese and lead, and that actually glows under ultraviolet. So we can use that as an exploration indicator for, could this thing be big? And there's another check mark in our favor at depth. So we'll see. It's really early days, but the exploration team is definitely chomping at the bit, as it were, to get back out there.
Well, it's certainly good news, especially in the midst of all the other conditions we've been talking about and record demand for silver, deficits, and you guys are going after 3 district scale high grade assets. So Lauren, perhaps in wrapping up, could you just let folks know if they do have questions about the project, would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do so?
Oh, you can get in touch with us at info@Reyna Silver. We're also on social media. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram. Our website has good information as well, and LinkedIn. And so, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or jokes, we're always happy to talk to you. Strongly suggest subscribing to the email blast so that you can stay up to date with what we're doing over at Reyna, and look forward to getting even more investors excited about Reyna Silver, and hopefully we make a big discovery.
Well, I think it's an exciting project you have, especially in the current environment. And again, folks can find out more at reynasilver.com. And also, you were kind enough to stick around, and we're going to record an update of a little more of the details of Medicine Springs, as well as the progress at Gigi and Batopilas. So thank you guys again for joining me, and the video with the details about the project is coming your way now.